The morning I finished restoring the old lake behind my home, a woman I'd never met marched across my gravel path, pointed at the water, and said something I'll never forget. That lake belongs to the HOA. Everything you built is ours. Her voice echoed across the calm surface like a warning siren. And just like that, peace turned into war. I moved out here because the world had worn me down. 25 years of field inspections, county regulations, and endless reports had turned my bones into paperwork. So when I inherited my father's cedar-handled toolbox and his faded American flag, I took it as a sign to rebuild something that mattered. The property I bought sat just outside the HOA boundary, a quiet stretch of land with an abandoned lake that had turned into a muddy ditch. Every evening, I'd sit on my porch with my dad's chipped coffee mug, watching fireflies drift over the water. I could almost hear him say, "Son, make something beautiful here." So I did. 6 months of hauling silt, clearing brush, digging a new drainage line, and installing an eco-filter system turned that ditch into clear water that shimmered under moonlight. The morning, everything changed. I was tightening the last bolt on a floating dock when I heard heels clacking against my walkway. Sharp, fast steps, the kind made by someone who thinks the world should stop for them. She wore a blazer with gold, buttons, and a stare that could cut a fence post in half. The type of stare you only get from decades of bossing people around. "My name is Carly Hargalon," she said. "President of Willow Landing HOA. I didn't shake her hand. She didn't offer it anyway. "You've developed a community lake without authorization. This water," she pointed dramatically, "is association property." My jaw tightened. "Ma'am, this land isn't in your HOA. That's what you think." She held up a folder thick enough to choke a printer. I didn't say a word. I let her talk herself into a corner. "The HOA has historical usage rights," she continued. "This lake was intended as a shared amenity. Your improvements belong to all residents, effective immediately." I noticed something strange in her eyes, too wide, too bright, like she'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. Why does she look so sure? I wondered. She slapped an envelope on my dock railing. 72 hours to remove all unauthorized structures, or we will place a lien on your property. You can't take something that isn't yours, no matter how loud you say it. My hands curled into fists. The lake rippled behind her. A gust of wind rattled the cedar post beside me. Inside, my thoughts were racing. She's bluffing. She has to be. My deed is clean. My records are clean. Why is she so confident? That evening, I walked my boundary line with a flashlight. My father always said fences aren't just wood and wire, they're promises. Near the eastern corner, something felt wrong. Fresh soil. A missing metal stake. Boot prints leading back toward the HOA trail. Someone had tampered with my markers. The next day, I dug into county records. Plat maps, easements, abandoned parcels. My old job made this second nature. Everything said the same thing. My lake. Zero HOA jurisdiction. But late that night, while I was on my porch sipping coffee from Dad's mug, I noticed an old man across the water. He leaned against his porch rail, watching me. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood there with a knowing look, as if he'd seen this exact nightmare before. 2 days later, a county clerk called. "Mr. Walker, the Willow Landing HOA submitted a lien request against your parcel for $124,000. Restoration costs." I nearly dropped my phone. "But your land isn't in their boundary. The request is invalid." Light pressure in her voice told me this wasn't the first time she dealt with HOA overreach. I hung up with my pulse hammering. Why is she doing this? Why risk filing something so obviously illegal? That night, the old man finally walked over. His name was Walter Briggs, and he'd lived beside this lake for 50 years. He sat on my porch like he'd been waiting for the invitation. "I saw their workers out here a few weeks ago," he said. "They pulled your stakes up and shoved them in their truck. Told me they were clearing debris." My stomach sunk. "So they altered my boundary before they came at me?" Walter nodded. "She's been eyeing this lake for years. Said it could double the HOA fees if they controlled it." That explained everything: the confidence, the forged history, the desperation, the HOA, weaponized gossip next. A community-wide email blast went out. Outsider steals community lake. Destroys habitat. Refuses to work with HOA. Within hours, neighbors glared at me in the hardware store. 2. Anonymous letters landed in my mailbox, telling me to leave before things get worse. Sheriff deputy visited twice because of anonymous construction complaints. None had merit. All were designed to break me. But every complaint became evidence. Every lie became documentation. Every threat became proof. I stacked everything in a binder thicker than my father's old. Sunday Bible, HOA meeting night felt like stepping into enemy territory. Fluorescent lights. Folding chairs. Residents whispering my name like I was a ghost story. Carly sat at the center of the board table with a smile so tight it could cut gravel. "Mr. Walker," she said. "State your comment." I held up the 1961 plat map, the real one. My land was designated private 24 years before this HOA existed. Her smile twitched. "Your historical agreement says otherwise," she snapped, producing a photocopied page. Before she could blink, the board treasurer leaned closer and frowned. "Carly, where's the original?" Carly didn't answer. Then a man in the audience shouted, "You said buying the lake would double our fees. Is that what this is really about?" Chaos, shouts, murmurs, people turning against her. She slammed her gavel so hard the table shook. The next morning, I met a real estate attorney who'd handled HOA abuse for decades. He skimmed my evidence and nodded slowly. "She forged that document. We get the county to confirm there's no record she's done." We filed a request for every historical document connected to my parcel. When the envelope arrived, it held something explosive, a quitclaim deed from 1989, signed by the original HOA board president, releasing any and all interest in my land. Carly had known it existed. She hid it, then invented a fake agreement to rewrite history. A week later, the DA opened a criminal inquiry. When word spread, the neighborhood turned. People who once glared at me now apologized. Board members demanded answers. And that's when the storm truly hit. At the next emergency meeting, Carly stood up trembling. "I only did what was best for the community," she said, voice cracking. "I had to correct a mistake," a resident shouted. "You faked documents to steal a man's property?" Another added, "And you took HOA money for your own company?" The mask came off. She broke down screaming, "This lake should have been ours." And that was the moment her power ended. The board voted 5-0 to remove her. The lien was withdrawn. The HOA issued an apology. The DA filed charges. 6 months later, she pled guilty to forgery, filing false claims, using HOA funds for personal gain. She received probation, community service, and a restitution order. Meanwhile, I received my legal fees covered compensation for harassment. Official recognition clearing my name. Spring arrived, and the lake looked better than ever. A heron nested near the cattails. My dock stood firm. Dad's old flag waved over the porch just like he always kept it. Walter visited often, leaning on his cane, smiling as fish returned to water they hadn't touched in decades. I drove a new cedar boundary post into the ground. Brass coordinates, concrete base, a line that couldn't be moved again. Sometimes the biggest bullies aren't loud, they're official. They hide behind rules, paper, and fake authority. But there's one thing stronger than forged documents: truth backed by patience. And the courage to stand on the line your father taught you to protect. If you've ever faced an HOA bully, share your story below. And subscribe to NeighborLoom for more real homeowner victories. Next time, remind me to tell you what Walter found buried under the old stump near the lake. It changed everything.